Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you could join me for this recording with Dr. Amber Golshani. Today, we're talking about Fire Cider. And before I introduce Dr. Amber, I just want to say a little bit about why I decided to do this. So I'm in all of the homesteading groups, the off-gridders, the do-it-yourselfers, and this is a community of people who really have taken the words I've given them and other people when we say you are your own best doctor. And there's so much stuff you can do at home, and just really reserve having to work with a medical professional when there's an actual problem that you cannot take care of yourself. And I believe this. I teach all my patients this. I teach my community. And Dr. Amber is someone I think who's doing this too. So I've gotten just hundreds of questions about Fire Cider, and I decided to bring an expert on to talk to us about it. So this is Dr. Amber Golshani. She graduated from the same school I did, but before me in 2004. And that's Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, which is no longer named that, just FYI for people. They've changed it to something like Sonoran University or whatever. But it really was a college where we went to learn how to be naturopathic doctors. And she went to Maryland, Easton, Maryland, where she had a practice for 10 years as an ND. And then, as life has it, our paths take us different places. And she ended up in Colorado a number of years ago, 4 or 5, maybe 6. It's been
9
now. Wow.
Yeah.
And she took time off from doctoring to homeschool her 2 boys, right?
1 girl, 1 boy.
One girl, 1 boy. And, time passed, and now she finds that she has time to devote herself to this wonderful stuff we call Fire Cider. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you at this point, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about you, a few more details and things like that.
Thank you, Eli. I'm really excited to be here. I like to consider myself a little bit of a do-it-yourselfer as well. And the thing that excites me the most is about creating that sense of self-sovereignty and independence in my patients, so that they realize, oh, I don't have to run to the pharmacy every time, or even run to me every time they need anything, but they can actually take care of themselves. And so when I moved to Colorado and I was homeschooling my kids, part of their education was learning about the plants that are in the area. And I even taught a 8-week course for kids learning plant medicine through some really fun and creative ways. Oh, my dog is barking.
It's okay. He wants to be here too.
He wants to go outside. So I'm sorry. I'm going to have to let him out.
That's okay. I'll pause.
Okay. Thank you. So, I was spending a lot more time with plants. I was spending a lot more time outside. Previously in our naturopathic schooling, and then in my clinic, I was utilizing herbs and plants in a more clinical sense. I felt really kind of still in the paradigm of use an herb for this ailment. This herb is antimicrobial. This herb is antidepressant. So I was still matching an herb to an ailment, or an herb to a disease. Oh, this herb is good for this thing. But when I started really hanging out with plants more, and I use mint as an example. I was growing mint in my backyard. And in the summer, sometimes I would just go outside and sit there with the mint and notice the little bees that would come up to the flowers, and feel the warmth of the sun, like sort of making the scent aromatic. And sometimes I would just take a little pinch of the leaf and smell it, or put it on my tongue and taste it, and just sit with the plant and see what the plant could teach me about itself through this more visceral and energetic experience. And then, I love growing my own stuff. So then I would dry it and taste the difference between what is the dried, what is the cool, the fresh, what cooling difference does that bring to my body. And I discovered a lot more about the energetics of herbs, which is the more traditional way that all of these systems, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, have always used plants. It's looking at, not from the sense of, oh, this one is antimicrobial. It's looking at, oh, this plant is cooling and drying and excitatory. And so then matching the energetics of the plant with the energetics of the patient. And every person is unique. So even with, the dominant medical system just wants to say, oh, everybody with allergies is the same, so they're all going to get the same treatment. And even, I'll admit, some of the herbalism I was doing at that point was very on the same system. Oh, well, you have allergies, so everybody needs stinging nettles. Rather than looking at, oh, this person with allergies is dry and have a dry sore throat. So something that's going to dry them out more may not be the most appropriate herb, versus somebody with allergies who maybe is, their eyes are watering and they have all this mucus. That's a very different patient and having a whole different set of experience in their body that's going to require an herb that would maybe be more drying. So I started matching the energy of the plant to the energy of my patient and started having some really just amazing results. And at that time, it was like mostly my family, my friends, my cousin might call me and ask for advice. But it was really exciting to see this more traditional system working.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, oh yeah. We had a professor in school. Her name was Deborah Brammer, and she was really big on get to know the plants. They'll talk to you. They'll, you can develop, they're living beings, right? And you can develop a relationship. So those words stuck. Oh, what an exciting discovery to be able to go out and get to know the plant. So where in Colorado are you right now? Pueblo?
So I live in Pueblo, Colorado, which is considered Southern Colorado. We're a very sunny, I don't know if you can see the sun coming in here, a very sunny and dry climate, which is also something that we need to take into account when we're considering our patients and ourselves, we'll say ourselves, the energy of the herbs that we may need that will support us well. I grew up on the East Coast where it was humid,
right,
very moist. And so out here, I mean, some of the first things I noticed when I moved out here was how dry my skin was, how dry my hair was, and like internally more dry. I started to move more towards a slow digestive system or constipation. So I generally use more moistening herbs as part of my daily life. And that's something I think is really important too, is that we blur the lines of what is food as medicine, because or herbs as medicine. Herbs are food. They're really concentrated, potentized sources of nutrition. And I really enjoy using them more on a daily tonifying basis, rather than waiting until you're sick and then trying to use the herb to undo the sickness.
Right. Create health. Absolutely.
Right. Create health, build health, invest in building that health.
I agree. So, all right, let me tell you the only thing I know about Fire Cider, other than reading your posts and watching whatever videos you do put up. I know it has apple cider vinegar, and I know a lot of my crowd, especially people who will watch this, are actually making their own apple cider vinegar, and that's not what this interview is about. So if you guys want to make your own apple cider vinegar, you'll have to pair something with this. But that's actually, and then of course, my knowledge of apple cider vinegar came from my studies of Edgar Cayce. and
Mhm.
his work and his writings. And
Mhm.
then of course Bragg's came along and he had a lot of good things to say about it. So that's where I'm at. And I would bet a lot of people who will watch this will be in the same place. So Fire Cider is everywhere.
Yeah.
You were in my universe, you were kind of like the leader of the pack. You're the first person that I knew as a naturopathic
Yeah.
doctor who really embraced this as something
Yeah.
good and nutritious and healing for the body. And now in the last year, it's everywhere.
Yes.
So people have questions. So tell us about, well, you know, tell us about Fire Cider, but I'm really curious, what was the step from communing with the plants to, oh, I think I'm gonna, you know, prepare this as Fire Cider.
Well, thank you. So I love making my own medicine. And for years, I have taught classes on how to make your own medicine. So everything from making alcohol tinctures, herbal syrups, infusions, decoctions, pastilles. I have taught classes like this, and I have taught a specific make your own fire cider class. I first learned about this remedy probably close to 15 years ago from Rosemary Gladstar, who is sort of, I consider her the grandmother of modern American herbalism. And, you know, she gives credit too that she didn't invent this either. As you mentioned, apple cider vinegar itself has thousands of years of usage for various health issues. But she was the one that kind of coined the term fire cider. So I have one of her books. It's probably one of my favorite books and most inspirational for the type of doctor that I am now. And she had a recipe and she called it Fire Cider Zest. And at that, it was a very short, maybe 1 or 2 line description. Hey, this is very warming. It's great for the winter. It'll add some zest to your step. And that was kind of, I think, all it said. So I started using it. And really, at that time, I was thinking how to keep my family healthy during the winter.
When you say
And
using it, what do you mean
yes.
when you say use it?
So making the fire cider myself, which I'll go over, and then using it daily, like a tablespoon,
Okay.
stirred into some water and taking it as a tonic.
Okay.
Again, putting it in our everyday diet to build health. Now, when inevitably at some point we all get sick, it's also something that can be used in those moments on a more regular basis to help the body recover from the illness faster. And at that point, you can use a tablespoon every hour if that is right with your constitution. So I had taught these classes, and the last one that I taught was in 2019 in the fall. And this was right before the pandemic. So I was teaching about it, not just in the class, but sort of mentioning on social media about this thing that people could make. And even my students that had taken the class that learned how to make it themselves were still contacting me saying, oh my gosh, mine's not ready yet, or I haven't had a chance to make it. And it does take about a month to make. So for whatever reason, we're all busy. I mean, it's okay. Not everybody is going to want to make this themselves. So I started providing it for people, and I just started making a little bit. I'll just make a bigger batch so I have some extra to give away. And pretty soon word just kind of spread in my local community. People were not getting sick as often. They noticed that they would recover faster. It really helped thin the mucus, drain the mucus, or their digestion got better, and these problems that they'd been dealing with in their digestion for years all of a sudden was better. And people would, give a bottle to their grandma, or, tell a friend, oh, talk to Amber. I got it from Amber. And so pretty soon people just started contacting me and wanting it. So I started making a bigger batch and a bigger batch. And the way that, I feel like things go with, whether you call it God or the divine life force came through, I was able to, I had an opportunity come my way for entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs in the local food space. And that's part of my mission too, is to use what's local and available and support our local farmers. So I got enrolled for free in this 6-month startup business class. And I started to look at this as more than just a hobby, but something that as someone that's going through a divorce, I could grow into a business that would not only be supporting other people's health and supporting the greater good, but supporting myself financially, and something that I felt really good in doing. So that was kind of the leap that took me into just a hobby, excuse me, to, you know, seeing the bigger picture of this. And I think, at this point in my career, I'm not seeing patients one-on-one anymore. And this feels like the right way that I can still make a contribution to our society. And Fire Cider, it is an infused apple cider vinegar. So I'm infusing it with herbs, warming herbs, fruits, and roots. And the apple cider vinegar is sour. The onions, garlic, the chilies that I'm using are pungent. And then in some of my formulations, I'm using dandelion root and dandelion leaf, which are providing some bitter. And now I'm mentioning these flavors because, again, going back to these traditional systems of medicine, they believe that you had to balance all 5 flavors to have health. So I mentioned sour, bitter, pungent, and then the other 2 are salty and sweet. So Fire Cider, I mean, most Americans aren't getting a whole lot, particularly of bitter, of sour.
No, they don't.
Right. And even, I mean, a lot of Americans do get sweet and salty, but from an herbalist perspective, those things are different. We're not talking about a sweet bowl of ice cream or something like that. The sweet flavor refers to more like the starches that are found in nourishing roots like ashwagandha, like astragalus, that provide that deep nourishment, particularly for our adrenal system. So help us deal with stress over time. But those are the, you know, Fire Cider does have honey in it, which adds a little bit of that sweetness, which brings some of the moistening and cooling properties to Fire Cider, because the name says it all. Fire Cider, it's meant to be fiery. And when you taste something that's pungent, you know, when you eat a bite of like a spicy curry or something like that, you're like, woo, you are awake, right?
Right. Right. It really impacts your senses.
Yes, it's enlivening. Yes. It speeds things up. And so Fire Cider is particularly good for people or in the season where things are colder, slower, and maybe even damper. So that's why Rosemary Gladstar really talked about this as being a winter remedy. I have tried to make it more balanced so that someone could use it year round, if it's right for them and depending on their climate and all of that stuff. But really, I think so many people are getting just the most amazing benefits because we don't eat sour, bitter, pungent foods. And all of a sudden, when you give the body, you know, that piece of the puzzle, your body's like, yes, I know what to do with this. This bitter thing is going to stimulate my liver and my bile secretion and my enzyme secretion. And the sour is going to start the salivation in my mouth. And the sour foods also tend to contain a lot of antioxidants. So now we're giving the body this really potent anti-aging medicine. And the pungency, from the chili peppers, from the onion, from the garlic, also again, stimulating that digestive function that helps to speed us up. And our culture is kind of, in general, one that's like a little more slow. We're not very physically active. We don't do a lot of, we exist within kind of a comfort zone. That we don't push ourselves outside of a lot. So this is kind of like a wake up for that system, like, hey, let's get moving.
And I would imagine then it also has immune system benefit. Once everything's working the way it should, right? What did Lindlar say? Lindlar or Lust? Lindlar, I think, said it first. give the body what it needs, get out what is poisoning it or
Mhm.
blocking it from being its healthiest, and stimulate the vital force. And it sounds to me like fire cider hits all of those three. Not like, I'm not saying it's the only thing you need,
Yeah.
a magical cure all, but health tonics used to be huge
Yeah.
in societies all over the world. Like, it's something you took a little bit of every day. It was really good for you, and it helped your body do what it does naturally, which is heal itself. So,
Right.
okay, well, what about, so you said it takes a month to make.
Yes.
So
Let's
I'm wondering if you have large glass containers all over your house full of herbs and apple cider vinegar.
I do indeed. I have found, I have 6.5 gallon glass carboys.
Wow.
Yeah. So, they
How are
are,
you strong enough to move those?
well, they have a harness,
Oh,
and
okay.
I try not to move them too much because I've already broken two because they're glass, and glass is, I would recommend always making this in glass. It's the least reactive container that you can use, especially when dealing with vinegar, which is acidic.
Right.
So
Okay.
yes. So to talk a little bit about making it, I first want to give a shout out again to Rosemary Gladstar. This is not something that I didn't make this up. I'm using her recipe, and this is a whole book about fire cider.
Okay.
A whole book by Rosemary Gladstar and friends. And it contains really very easily accessible ingredients. So her basic recipe was horseradish root, onions, garlic, ginger, and then a cayenne or a jalapeno. Now, I live in Southern Colorado in Pueblo. We are really, our whole identity is about the Pueblo chili that grows here. So I use Pueblo chilies. And that's the beauty of this. And I want to encourage you all to make your own and not get hung up too much on doing it right. It's a very forgiving recipe with thousands of variations. Like, this book probably has 40 or 50 variations from all different herbalists. Everybody makes it a little different. And the good thing, you can customize it to you and to your environment. Because Pueblo, especially during in the summer, it gets hot here, like 100 degrees.
Oh,
So
wow.
I don't tend to make mine very spicy. Mine, I would say, is more on the mild spectrum of spice. But if you live in Canada or something like that, you might want something with more
Right.
of that spice in there. So her original recipe, and she talks about too, she's not a measurer, but she recommends starting with a 1/2 gallon glass jar, ball jar, and then a handful. So that's maybe like a 1/2 cup of horseradish, a 1/2 cup of chopped onion. So all this stuff chopped or grated. And then a 1/4 cup of garlic and a quarter cup of ginger. Like I said, I don't use too much chili pepper, but I do use a lot more ginger. It is still warming and can be spicy, but it also is, I just find it to have a bit more gentle warming on the body than that like punch you in the mouth kind of chili pepper flavor. So then chili, whatever chili pepper you want to use to your taste. And then you fill up your jar with apple cider vinegar. Use a non-reactive cap. So if you're using like a ball jar cap that's metal, you want to put a layer of parchment paper, 2 layers in there, or you can buy the plastic caps and put that on top. And then you'll want to let it sit for a month. So every day I recommend shaking it somehow. And during this time, I say this is the best time during that 30 seconds or minute for you to put your prayer, your love, your intentions into it. And I use a pretty simple and general intention. So I'm not shaking my 6.5 gallon jars.
No.
I'm stirring them.
Right.
And as I do, I just pray that the medicine will know exactly the right way to work within the body. Whoever's body that is, that's going to just find the right pathway. It's going to know the right, place to go for the individual that picks it up and uses it. Then after a month, strain it. Really, if you can use cheesecloth and squeeze that mark as what we call the herbal pieces that are in there, strain it, squeeze it out as much as you can. You can buy a wine press. There are some pretty simple, inexpensive wine presses that you can get, like just countertop size, that will really help you get the most out of it. And then you sweeten with honey. And that's something that's to your flavor, to your, to your taste. And I tend to, so for my 6-gallon jar, I'm using 5 pounds of honey, which they sell honey by weight. But I would say it's probably like a half a gallon of honey. So mine is not very sweet, because I believe that you could always sweeten it more if you needed. And I do recommend that it's always taken diluted. Now, I do know lots of people who are on this apple cider bandwagon, and they take a shot of it.
Yeah.
Yep. And they do the same thing with my fire cider, and that's okay. Everybody's constitution is different. So
I'm not woman enough for that. I tried it one time, and it was after I had been in the hospital. Like, I don't know that you know this, because we weren't really reconnected in 2018, but I almost died after a missed urinary tract infection diagnosis. And in the notes, they said she won't take the antibiotics anyway, but they just didn't bother to tell me, right? I could have treated it 100 other ways. Didn't. I went septic. And so I had a little bit of thrush, and I was very similar to fire cider, just so y'all know, is something called an oxymel. It doesn't ferment. It doesn't sit for a month. It's get up and 25 minutes later, you've got an oxymel, and that's from the Greek tradition, right? And it's vinegar, usually apple cider vinegar, garlic, honey. You can add ginger to it. Not as powerful, but if you need something and you haven't, been cooking for a month, cooking fire cider for a month. And I took a shot of that. Holy cow. My mouth was on fire. It was on fire.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy. Okay. So you strain it, you sweeten it, then you put it in a jar to store it.
Yep. It is pretty shelf stable, though you could, and again, depending on how much honey you use. But it will last longer in the fridge. But I have had bottles unrefrigerated for over a year,
right,
that are just fine. I mean, vinegar sits on your shelf forever.
And it's preserved because of the vinegar. I imagine there's some fermentation happening in.
There's actually no fermentation.
No fermentation. That surprises me.
I am using raw apple cider vinegar,
okay,
which, is going to contain those natural probiotics and prebiotics, but I'm really just infusing. It's sort of it's more like an acetic acid tincture or a vinegar tincture. And so that's why it sits for that month. There should be no fermentation. Now you can add all sorts of fruits to this. I've used lemon, I've used cranberries when I was making it, like after Thanksgiving, and I had all these cranberries left over. You can chop orange slices in there, which I find is really, really nice as well. I've started using pineapple in my turmeric blend. And that's really lovely too. I could imagine that if you put enough of a fruit in there, it could start to ferment because of the sugars, but I've not reached that.
And you don't sweeten it till after you strain it. So you don't have the sugar from the honey in there. Okay. All right. So in a jar, in the fridge, or on the shelf, I would imagine it doesn't sit around long enough to go bad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if people are buying this and rebuying it, they're using it.
Yes.
And you've already answered a big question I had, which was, can someone make this themselves at home?
Yeah.
What about when you're buying it from someone else? What kind of questions are important to talk to that person about?
Yeah, it is because it's a home product. There are a lot of, or it can be, I mean, there are people who can produce it on more of a commercial scale, which is where I'm hoping to go this year. But one of the things that I think is really important is the strength. What we, would call the mark to menstruum ratio, because you could make a product that If you've got this much herb and then 4, 5, 6 times as much vinegar, it's going to be more dilute versus each one of my 6-gallon containers has about 20 pounds of food in it. And in that 6-gallon container, 6.5-gallon container, because of how much food's in there, I can only fit 4 gallons of vinegar. So the other space is full of the food that's in there. And you can tell by looking at it. So I have a couple, this is my jar. It is an amber, it's that brown jar. This is my elderberry, rosehip, and hibiscus, but I don't know if you can tell, actually, it's really dark.
Yeah.
So you can tell that this is picked up the pigments of all the elderberries and the rose hips that are in there. So that's sort of just a way that we can tell with our sight is how strong it is. And also just the flavor. So the first flavor you're going to get is the sour from the vinegar, obviously, but you should be able to detect some of that pungency from the onions, from the garlic, from the chili pepper, from the horseradish. I would also say that I did try a commercial brand and it was so hot that I couldn't tell what else was going on.
Right.
I don't know how much really, how much garlic was in there because all I could feel was the burning.
Right. See, I wouldn't enjoy that. And when I hear fire cider, I think, oh, another hot and spicy thing.
Yeah.
But for what I'm learning now in talking to you is you can dial back on that. So if we're a family that don't, I still want the pungency, but I don't want to burn out my taste receptors and then not taste anything else that's in there.
Right. So, something you can totally customize this. You can, scale down maybe on the chili peppers and add more of the horseradish, which also has a pungency, but is not going to give you that same mouth-burning feel.
You don't get to burn.
Right. And you can add other herbs. So in my, in this elderberry and rosehip, obviously I have elderberry, I have rosehip. I also have rosemary and thyme. So both of those are really great herbs that have an affinity for our upper respiratory system. So this blend, it happens to be more geared towards that maybe winter viral cold and flu season to help support the body through that. But then I have another blend. This one I call my dandelion detox.
Ooh, it's lighter. Look at that.
It's lighter, right? You can see the sun coming through. I'm using dandelion greens and dandelion root. So this one is going to support the digestion a bit more, the digestive system. And I don't mean just the colon, but the liver, the kidneys, and help get things moving there. So you can, that one might be better in the springtime. So you could customize this to make it as gentle, as potent, as strong. You can add any, pretty much any herbs, spices that you might want. I've had, people that I know that add things like clove and star anise and cinnamon and black pepper. The kitchen is our best medicine, our best pharmacy.
It is really. Kitchen. Are you able to grow any of the herbs that you use, or do you need them in such a high volume that you have to source them?
Well, in the past, when I was making smaller batches, I've grown my own garlic, onions, and horseradish. And this year, the dandelion detox blend that I just showed you does have my own homegrown horseradish. It takes about a bit of irrigation because I live in such a dry place. But it is really so rewarding and powerful that, I nurtured this horseradish for months. And then let me tell you, digging it out though.
I'm getting to that stage.
Yeah.
Y'all, I want to tell you, she is the reason why I planted horseradish. From a little post last year, or maybe it was the end of 2021, where I think the post was, look what I'm growing. And I immediately recognized it as horseradish. And I was like, I could grow horseradish too. Yes. And I planted it and it sprouted, but it took months before I
Yes.
got a little green shoot. And oh, that's so awesome. I'm
And
in
the
the same
cool
boat with my teas, right? I can
Yes.
grow quite a bit of it, but the demand for it has exceeded. Like I either have to make a choice to be a farmer and just grow herbs, or
Mhm,
I can grow some of it and then source some of it, like the
mhm.
large quantities. So
Yeah.
okay, so now there's a few important things for y'all
Okay.
to know, because if you're like me, you're going to want to you're going to jump on email, and you'll see contact information at the bottom of the video there. You're going to want to reach out and order some. So not yet, unless you're in Colorado, right? So tell us about that.
So currently I'm operating under the cottage food license, which means I'm making my products at home. I sell them through my website locally, but also at vendors event and farmers markets. So my website, if you just want to check it out, and I do offer, I have for $9 a recording of the workshop that I did, the Make Your Own Fire
Oh,
Cider
nice. That's, I was going to
workshop.
ask you that too. If you still had classes, people could
I
attend.
do. It's not advertised on my website, but if anybody wanted that, they're welcome to contact me and I can give them access to
Okay.
that hour and a half recorded workshop.
Okay.
So yeah, so right now I am just selling in Colorado, but my plans are this year to move to a commercial facility where I can ship anywhere.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
most of us who will be watching this video totally understand that whole process.
Yeah.
Lots of people, making foods, nutritious, healthy, wonderful foods and medicines from the earth and offering them. Those cottage laws were a game changer for a lot of people in bringing things out to their community. So is there any time someone should not use fire cider, in your opinion?
Well, I would say it has to do with the individual's constitution. If you are a very hot, fiery person already, then it may not suit you very well.
Mhm.
Ulcers, it could aggravate. Also, indigestions. A lot of people get better from fire cider for their indigestion or acid reflux, but some people don't. And the
Mhm.
only way to do that is to try.
Give it a try.
I want to just make sure I say this. I say always dilute. And I think it's best to take it before a meal because it's going to help stimulate the digestive function anyway. So you might as well get that added benefit. And I like to be really creative. So on my website, I have a recipe for a Bloody Mary mocktail.
Oh, nice.
So alcohol free, you can have alcohol, of course, if you want, using the dandelion detox. The elderberry one, I really like to put into warm water and add another spoonful of honey or maple syrup and have it sip it like more of a warming tea or tisane. I'm making some pickled garlic and I'm making an elderberry pickled garlic. So I used some of the elderberry fire cider and then I put in bay leaves and black peppercorns, another spoonful of dried elderberries, and I'm going to let it sit for a year. So I got a long time to wait, but
That's nice. I wonder if you could make some salad dressings with it too, like vinaigrette.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great way to take it with the food. This summer, I was making a cucumber salad that I mixed some yogurt with a little bit of the fire cider, fresh dill, salt, pepper, and just tossing the cucumbers and thin sliced red onions in that. It was so good.
I bet that sounds really
Yeah.
yummy. So, okay. So y'all here, if you wanted to get Dr. Amber's fire cider, take a road trip to Colorado.
Yeah.
Because that it's a beautiful place anyway. So, and then you two birds with one stone. Although my daughter has said to me, quit saying two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about animals like that. Okay, well, let's wrap this up so folks can get back to their day. But I'd love if you leave us with a couple of things, some medicinal wisdom. People hear that medicinal wisdom from me all the time. So what are a couple of things that people can do in addition to fire cider to reestablish and stay balanced in health every day?
So this might not be the typical answer that you're expecting, but I think probably the most important things for me over my journey of the last few years has been to find a purpose, to stay connected to community, and then to stay connected to source, to God, to the divine, whatever you call that presence that's bigger than yourself, that gets me out of my own little mind of suffering. That has probably made the biggest impact for me. And when I started this business, I knew it couldn't be about, I have to sell X number of bottles in order to pay this bill. So like my goals this year are to help 3,000 people feel better, to serve the greater good. And I have built into my business model a way that I'm giving back to my community by supporting our food pantry, our local food pantry.
That is so inspiring. It's so wonderful. Well, I'm going to close like I usually
Thank
do,
you.
where I tell all of you, don't be too hard on yourself. You are a spiritual being having a journey in the clothing of a human. I believe that. That's my personal belief. And you have got to forgive yourself and love yourself, and don't lose faith in your ability to navigate this life. Find those good friends and those good mentors that you can talk to, but above all, be gentle with yourself. It's okay. It's all okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, and keep me posted if you go commercial, because man, I'll help you spread the word like there's no tomorrow. I will. We need good medicine in the world.
Thank you, Eli. What a pleasure. I hope everybody just feels confident and inspired to make your own, because this is, it's easy, and the power is yours. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Y'all have a good day.